Members, if I have a website for them on file, that's listed. A lot of them I don't have websites on file. The makeup of their board, regular meeting times, regular meeting location, current surcharge rate, primary contact information, and legal contact information. If you see anything on here that's not correct, there's two ways to fix that. You can send me an email and tell me what's wrong and I can fix it. Or if you are listed as the primary contact for that site, you can go in yourself through this link right below that where it says update your 911 authority profile. And you'll just have to put in your email and password, the email and password that you are listed as the primary for, and it will take you to a screen where you can update that. If you're not sure if you're registered as the primary, or you're not sure that you're registered as a user on here, just let me know and I can help make that happen for you if you have any difficulty with it. Same thing goes for PSAP profiles. And remember that 911 State of 911 report that I gave you this morning. All of that information came from these 911 PSAP profiles. So if you want to make sure that yours is up to date, first of all, you can click on 911 PSAP profiles. Now, the vast majority of the information that I talked about this morning is not on this profile, because this profile, this screen right here is open to the public. So there's really just basic information on here. General admin phone number, admin fax number, primary contact, training contact, and that's it. There's a lot more information that we ask for in the profile that you can update that's never shown on the website. And that's because it's strictly for updating the State of 911 report that we do yearly. So if you want to see the rest of the information, or if you want to update anything, you can go into update your 911 PSAP profile. And again, you have to have the email and password for the person who's set up as the primary contact for that PSAP. And again, if you think the wrong person is set up as the primary, or if you're the primary but you don't have a user profile yet, let me know and I can help lead you through that process. Now, earlier last year, I did some rearranging of some of the sub-pages because as new topics come up, as people ask me questions, and I do research for people on various topics, I try to include all of that information on the website. But every time I add another page on the website, it becomes just that much more difficult to navigate and find what you're looking for. So almost everything that's just an informational resource is now moved under this item right here that says resources. If you're on the home page, you can get to all of the pages two different ways. You can use this navigation bar that's on the left-hand side of the page, or I've put links right here on the main portion of the page. I mainly did that for people who are using their cell phones or tablets or something along those lines to access it, because that navigation bar can be hard to get to. But almost anything that's just an informational resource, if you click on resources, either here or here, it pulls up that resources page. And there's some general resources right on that front resources page. You can look through and see what's on there. But there's also all of these subtopics that are listed right here. They're also listed, if you click on this little triangle, it gives a drop-down menu. So they're listed both on the right and on the left. So you can get to whatever you're looking for. If you haven't been there in a while, there are a few new pages on there. I encourage you to take a look. There's a new page on here for text to 911. Which I mentioned earlier today. There isn't a whole lot of stuff on here about text to 911 yet, but as PSAPs in Colorado start to roll out text to 911, I'm glad to hear we have one in Pitkin County that's signed up to make that happen. We'll be putting more information on here. And in fact, I've got a new piece of information today that I can put on there about availability of text to 911 in Colorado. Under events, I've now simplified it to where you have current and upcoming 911 Resource Center events only are listed, and then one link for past events. So in the past you had to sort through all the previous events to find the current ones. Now you've got the ones that are coming up or happening right now, in fact, with the 911 Issue Summit link. But there's also one on here for the 2013 Fall 911 Goes to Denver. For those of you who don't know, we in addition to the 911 Goes to Denver event that we had this spring, we decided to do another one this fall. We decided the fall is the better time to do it. We didn't want to miss a legislative session, so we're going to have one on November 18th. And if you click on this link, there's not a whole lot of information on here yet, but we have the location, the agenda is still being developed. There's a registration page for attendees, and here's a link that says consider becoming a sponsor. I know there are a lot of vendors in the room here today, and we didn't have a lot of sponsors for today's event, but all is not lost because we have another event coming up. So you've got an opportunity to sign up for that. We highly encourage you to do that. We'll give you a lot of visibility for your company, and you'll also be helping to promote the cause of 911 service in Colorado. But if you want to look at any past events, those are here too. You click on the link for past events, and it lists them all right here on the front page. Any materials that I have from past events, on some of the pages, you can actually view the videos of the past events. So if you want to, if you say, I remember something from last year's 911 Summit that I wanted to refresh my memory on, you can go look at that. And this is a feature that I think is probably not used a whole lot because it's up here in the corner and people forget it's there, but no matter what page you go to on the Resource Center website, there's a search box up in the top right corner that says search this site. Because there are a lot of pages and you may not know exactly which one to get to, if you can think of the keyword you want to look for, you can search that way. So, if there's anything that we can do to make this better, make this more user-friendly, if you have any suggestions for how we can format this easier for you to find what you're looking for, please let me know. I'm really open to that, and I'm always making changes to try to make it a little bit better. So if you think of anything that we can do to make this a little bit more useful to you as a 911 professional in Colorado, I would welcome any input you're able to give me. And we're running a little behind, but I'm going to go back to the main topic, unless anybody has any questions for me on the recent changes to the website or to the listservs or email lists.
I think you've done a good job on a collection of data there.
Thank you.
I don't know if people say that to you enough, but it's a great resource for a lot of information.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, just briefly, and it's going to be brief because I don't have a lot of information on it, but I wanted to let people know, I've mentioned this before at a task force meeting, but I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that the National Emergency Number Association has this year decided to take on as an issue national minimum telecommunicator training standards. They are actually looking at creating a training standard that would be applicable in every state, and this was actually unveiled at the NENA Development Conference that was held. They up until this year they held it every spring. Starting next year, they're going to be holding it every October. But it was announced by their new education and I'm trying to remember his full title. He's the new education director for National Emergency Number Association, Ty Wooten. And I understand that it's also a priority of the current president, Buster Brown. And they are actually looking at trying to create a national training standard for telecommunicators. At the NDC meeting, there was some open discussion about how that could be achieved. Some of the ideas that were floated were to make it mandatory through by tying it to availability for grants, or even through Department of Justice requirements. I asked them at that meeting, whether what states that are working on their own training standards should do in the meantime. And of course, they said they should keep working on that because they don't really know exactly where that's going to go or how successful they may be in accomplishing this. But they're not letting it go either. This October, right before the APCO NINA conference in Longmont, there's going to be another meeting in Denver. National Emergency Number Association is having their Critical Issues Forum October 6th through 8th in Denver, and it has 2 topic tracks. One is on 911 data analytics, and the other one is on national telecommunicator training standards. I will be attending. I know there are several people from Colorado that are already planning on attending. I would encourage anyone, not just because the issue I think is going to affect every PSAP in the country if it continues down that road, but also because it's right here in our backyard, and we need to take advantage of those opportunities. While I'm on this topic, Ray Paddock has asked to talk a little bit about some of the joint committee meetings that are taking place in conjunction with the Critical Issues Forum. Ray, do you want to add? Something to that?
Be on the mic. Yeah, as I think has come up a couple of times, NINA hosts the standards development work that goes on for not only NextGen 911 going forward, but some of the current implementations as well. And right after the meeting that Daryl just mentioned, there's a joint committee meeting. All of the ongoing committees that have been working on standards get a chance every once in a while to get together and especially work on issues that cross different committees. It is in Denver. It doesn't cost anything to participate in those. It's preferred that you be a NINA member to participate, but it's not an absolute requirement. But what is required is if you've been thinking about joining a committee to do some of the standards work, this would be a good opportunity to say, yeah, let me join up now. But it shouldn't be viewed as just a one-time meeting. You should, if you're going to join a committee, you should join the committee and then be willing to work on it for the duration of their effort. It doesn't have to be a lot of work. It usually means just getting on a committee call once a week. But it does require that you contribute and give your thoughts, especially the perspective of some of the government folks here. The reason I asked for a minute is because I actually had one of the working groups that just completed a standard on policy routing rules for NextGen 911. And we've decided that instead of going to a version 2 of that document, we're going to put together sort of a companion document that does an assessment of the operational issues. So mutual aid agreements you've got now, how does that change going into NextGen 911? What kind of tools do you need? And so the primary contributors to the version 1 of the standard were vendors, as is usually the case. This is really operationally oriented, and so I could really use more people from the government side actually participating. And actually, I could use a co-chair for that committee, so if somebody wanted to really step up big and be a co-chair, I'd like that as well. Jay Slater, a friend of mine, has had some challenges getting accepted into certain committees, and sometimes it feels like a secret society or something. You got to know the secret handshake. It's not intended to be that way, but if anybody wants to join a committee, if it's the Policy Routing Rules Committee, you can come directly to me. If you want to work on another committee and you want to, you can use me. So I won't dump this off to Daryl. I'll take it on myself to help you get involved in those committees if you'll send me an email, and Daryl, you can probably provide that. But that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. And about the National Telecommunicator Standards track at the Critical Issues Forum, if you look at the NINA's website, there are 3 items here that they have listed as the goals for that CIF. The first one is to identify modes and means to elicit buy-in and feedback from stakeholders. Second is establish a recommended base framework for a national training floor for telecommunicators based upon a review of current training standards and models. And develop an action plan for national adoption. So this Critical Issues Forum, is, at least on that track, the National Telecommunicator Training Standards track, is not a, this is almost like a NINA development conference. These sound like working meetings. So I know this, I'm only harping on this because I know that this will affect every PSAP in the country, not just to say Colorado. And so if you have opinions on this, and I know that some of you do, this would be an opportunity to get involved at the ground level and make your voice heard. I already talked about those. Next up is an update from Brian Shepard and Nathan Lowry from State Office of Information Technology. Before we do that, though, I want to ask, because I see some heads nodding and people's eyes kind of drooping a little from lunch. Do we want to take a break first, or do you want to take it after the next session? Is everyone too asleep to answer the question? You want to take a break now? Okay, let's take a 15 minutes. Come back at 2:15. Thank you. Guys, I also forgot to mention, there's a cooler right outside the door here with water wells in it. And there's some other types of
So that part of it.
Are you gonna run for, region director? Yeah. So I bet Eric Perry is. Huh? I bet Eric Perry is. He's in Utah.
He's the education man. Family Scottish, I gotta kill him. I lost track.
Whatever the heck document he sent me, I'm like.
Their type of bacon. They do it.
No, I'm working on trying to be so you can find your way out.
Walk out of the other. I made a point to shower very early in the morning, very late, because I did not want to have to remember everybody in the shower.
I was really bummed when they scheduled the JCA. Sometimes they're supposed to land an email. Yeah, this is probably not anyway, but somebody should pay attention to this. I'm sorry. But again,
Well, what I will do.
It's actually cheap. It's like $340. Yeah, like we were laughing because second exit in Idaho Springs Bridge, as you get off the bridge there, gas stations. It's cheaper. It's cheaper there than it's cheaper
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if
Well, we sat there on the way, so we were like.
But I to the degree so.
Until you could smell the burn that's walked through.
So I really want to watch that.
Rollaway had a slot cut into it for the coffee. You know, like your coffee cup. You like bring your rollaway, grab your coffee cup, throw it in your back pocket, just go in. Walk in and switch it. That was a big thing when they started saying, put your coffee outside the door. Yeah, different, it's different, it's different.
I just want to listen to this kind of thing, is that good?
Oh, I T-erased it as a document. They did that just right. Yeah, we're still, although, hey, I've never heard this thing come without them finally reading our policies. Have voicemails. So then you can erase the email, and it comes up your voicemail.
Well, he used to work across the street.
What I'm waiting for too, because I'm on the Comcast does. You don't get an email with your voicemail? The typed out message. So you can do that too. Some things, I'm always Linda, but some things are, but you can generally tell. You know, I only have a little short pages on here, but there's a folder that says 2013 9/11 Summit. So now, but the worst part was when I do everything, I don't even have a voicemail shut. I do everything by the computer. So I erase them all. And then I'll send them it was right? But whatever this stuff is, I guess things so when you take it off of your computer, it comes off the phone too. You know, your job, I don't know how many calls when it says. So I was up to like 350 clearing them off, and it was still going, and I was like, yeah.
Well, you have three ways to use it. You can bring it in like you did the TDD.
Yeah. They dropped them off. They dropped them off. Ever since, because to get to our new beautiful page, and I didn't put this, they kind of decided which ones they were going to put up there first. So they're all on their own way to get to the website, even though that's not the first thing we see. So we can find them and still get them and tell them to reload. So that's helpful to know that something didn't transfer. Yeah. Yeah, and I think what they did is they went through everything and made their own, not them, that wasn't PUC, our coordinator or the PUC. Probably went through everything and said, oh, or it's not a priority right now, because
They should be able to find you, dude. The only guy out on the field. The one not in a tractor.
No.
That's right. I heard this. Unless we can launch it then at once, so we can get it.
Okay, I hope everyone is refreshed from the break. As I mentioned before the break, our next presentation is from the State Office of Information Technology, and we have we'll start off with Nathan Lowry and then Brian Shepard. Go ahead.
Okay. So not everybody knows who I am. I am Nathan Lowry. I work for the Governor's Office of Information Technology with Brian Shepard in the same office. My responsibility is on addresses and developing a statewide address data set. And this is kind of making funny noises, so I'm moving it. Hopefully it's a little bit better. Glad to meet you all, and I want you to be able to ask me questions. That's most important. So I'm going to go very quickly through these slides. Hopefully I don't lose any of it. I do have a clicker, and it does work. Yes. There we go.
Yeah, to see the slides. Hold on a second.
Oh,
There you go.
so now it's projecting. Okay, so the good news is that over the last year and 3 months since I've been working, the participation rate to develop the statewide address data set is very high across all the counties in Colorado. Those who have address data, mostly for E911 authorities, I'll just change over to the mic.
Okay. Just give it a second.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, that's better. The participation rate is growing very quickly. Those counties and other agencies, 911 authorities, who are participating across the states, if they have data, they've been providing it for the most part. And those that remain are those who have not developed data for their jurisdictions. We're talking about the point placement of addresses in a map interface, so geographic information systems. I hope that's clear enough for most people in this room. We kind of organize the efforts in 6 areas, have a plan, develop quality measurements, automate processes, train people, especially emergency services personnel, publish data, and maintain and measure and improve that, communicate along the way. What's most important, we're trying to locate buildings, particularly residences and workplaces, specifically their main entrances if possible, but we'll take any data that any jurisdiction has. If you have a pocket full of what you might call addresses for your jurisdictions, we have a low floor and a high ceiling, and the quality measures help us with that. To be able to have a heterogeneous data set across the state, we can describe the data and the quality of that data from one jurisdiction to the next. And so that's how we're going to handle and approach that. Why are we doing this? 3 reasons. Broadband mapping is the responsibility of the Governor's Office of Information Technology. That's the principal reason. That's the funder. It's the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. But we're also doing this for administration accuracy, so that the state across all agencies can use that address data for different purposes. And most importantly, to assist in the notification, evacuation, recovery of personnel and property in response to natural and man-made emergencies. So that's the highest value. Why now? It's important to lots of different people for lots of different reasons. I think you'll be able to get this off the slides later, but it's a key for so many other data sets. An address holds the lock to knowing about people and about places. So we're using that as a high value data set with a low level of effort across the state.
Switch it. Some distortion.
Sounds good. Okay, so The modeling is pretty straightforward. We focused on the Federal Geographic Data Committee's April 2011 standard. Three main portions of that is that all data would be fully explicit, no abbreviations allowed, parsing is no longer subject to interpretation, and every address would also have a unique identifier associated with it. So here's kind of the conceptual model where we have street addresses and landmark addresses. Also mailing addresses can be included and associated with address points. And so this is kind of our relational database model. You don't have to worry too much about it. We're not requiring it of any jurisdiction. This is just a means for us to be able to gather data from across the state and store it in a way that would have the least level of loss from that jurisdiction. On data quality, we're focused in two areas. One, that we can develop measures, and then we can also compare our data against other sources to fill in gaps, particularly omissions. So, for example, the U.S. Postal Service has quality improvement databases that allow us to fill in the ZIP +4, or maybe we get information from the statewide voter registration system about an address that we weren't aware of because they don't have landline phones and they haven't registered. Automated processing is really an effort that I have yet to fully flesh out, but basically it has three parts. We gather the data from local jurisdictions, we convert that to the common data model, and then we provide that in a database that provides services to both the state and participating jurisdictions, and then out to the public where possible. We are developing an address collection training regiment, so emergency services personnel and others can help participate in updating and validating address data. And we've been given some valued assets from Trimble, so the access to their Terraflex software, which is a pretty easy interface to use. It works with any mobile iPhone, Android app, as well as the Trimble mobile GPS equipment, so it's pretty versatile. But finally, just publishing this data as a set of services has been kind of the end point so that people can use it for different purposes. And one of the primary purposes, obviously, in our state in the last 2 years has been response to wildfires, now response to floods. I just wanted to make sure that people, I don't know how many are familiar with the Lower North Fork Wildfire Commission report and its recommendations. But they are here. I just have some of that highlighted in yellow. Consider the benefits and drawbacks of establishing a centralized compatible reverse 911 system. Also the El Paso Teller E911 Waldo Canyon fire well, there were many after action reports, but if those who are familiar, Mr. Gary Klug did an analysis of emergency notification systems. Has anybody read that? I think the recommendations there are very poignant. I think one of the things that he brings out is there needs to be a mechanism for information to be verified and geocoded, but particular a GIS system needs to be able to provide a report of locations in the event area that will not be provided a notification. You need a list of those who are not able to be contacted so that they can go door to door and make sure everybody has that ability to be evacuated or whatever it may be in the emergency response. So I wanted to just kind of highlight those things, mostly ask if you have questions for me.
Where are you putting your address point? Say it's a big polygon, where are you putting it? At the entry level, at the street, in the middle?
We're replacing the address points. Well, our target, at least across the state, is to focus on facilities, residences and workplaces, and on the main entrance. Now, that is a guidance, so to speak, or at least our expression of what the best case would be. But across the state, it varies very widely. We're comfortable with that at the moment, and we'll provide measures of quality, including positional accuracy, for each jurisdiction over time.
So you're basically taking what the jurisdiction gives you?
That's correct.
Repeat the question for the
Right, so we're basically taking what the jurisdiction gives us. Yes, that is correct. However, there are many jurisdictions that have not developed address data yet. So we are working with those jurisdictions as well to develop that data. In fact, we went to San Juan County just this summer. Yes? In the back?
Oh, okay, just curious if you could talk to ongoing then, are you all developing a process for keeping the data updated, or are there expectations there? And then also, when you said it would then be available out for people to use in other purposes, is that gonna be through the statewide portal, or has that been thought about?
Okay, so the first question was again, just say it again, I'm sorry.
The first question went to ongoing updates of the data.
Okay, so maintenance. So are we providing means for maintenance? Yes. Part of that is through the field training. We'll also, we have not yet developed a web-based application for people to manage and maintain their data. That's probably most important for the smallest jurisdictions that don't have GIS software and personnel. For the most part, most of the jurisdictions in the state do. And so we let them maintain and manage that data and provide us updates. And it's more of a utility for us to be able to manage that as time progresses. So we are looking for automated means to be able to have that data flow.
Okay, and the second half was, so then you said making the data, I'm sorry. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm afraid he's not getting that.
The second half was making the data available out for people to use. Was the intent of that publicly through like available data through the state internet portal, or I missed that piece?
Right, so across the state, we have a number of jurisdictions that want to provide their data to the public and do, in fact, do that already. A good example might be Mesa County, across the Denver Metro, the North Central All Hazards region, as a group decided that all their address data could be made available publicly. And so that data will be, is not yet, but yet will be made publicly by the state in a set of services. We already have a set of services for the state government, and we've been asking in a cascade fashion, you know, can you provide, are you willing to provide your address data that you provided to the state to go to other jurisdictions that are providing data, or to the U.S. Census Bureau, or to the wildland fire management teams? And so that's how we're getting it out there. What kinds of services are we providing? Web map services initially. We really want to provide a set of geocoding services, or address matching, kind of a better phrase in my mind, so that different jurisdictions, for different purposes, even businesses, if it were available through the internet, can use that for their own benefits.
Oh, thank you.
Are you going to charge them for that data sharing, or is it going to be open and free to all the agencies?
Right now, it's a matter of local jurisdictions. If they provide to the state and want it only available to the state, that's fine. We are trying to encourage people to provide it to the public wherever possible. But we, at this point, don't have any plans on charging anybody for access to the data. Is that a good answer?
Well, because a lot of agencies charge for it.
Some counties charge even other counties for their data. So that was my question, if they're, say, County Z is charging for their data for all the other counties, it goes to the state, then they could say that they don't want that released, they're only providing it to you, is that what you're saying?
That's correct. That's correct. We're trying to keep everybody at their own word. If they're comfortable giving it to the state, great. If they're not comfortable giving it to anybody else, that's fine. But yeah, we do want to encourage. The value of the data is much more in the use of the data, and you have more people using the data, and it provides more value. So it's more of a philosophical belief, but we don't want to press that into anybody's personal or individual agency policies. Hope that's a fair answer. Okay.
And well, I think that's a good point while Daryl was bringing up my slide, that, the data is your data. I know there's some folks that hesitate to share information with us at the state, but I just want to emphasize, it's your data. We work with you guys. So, as Nathan said, our goal is just to create a unified structure and data set, because we see the value, and I think the events of the last couple of weeks have shown that value, that when some of these things happen, it's a whole lot of people working together to accomplish things. So. Okay, my name is Brian Shepard. For those of you that don't know me, for those that do, it's great to be back here and talk to everyone. And real quick, I'm just gonna kind of update you guys on what we're doing at OIT, independent of what Nathan and his colleagues are doing in terms of broadband and how it relates to public safety. And talk a little bit about the FirstNet initiative. So let's see here, there we go. Okay, so the main thing that we're working on in terms of broadband is we're really trying to push out and figure out how do we get broadband out to the rural parts of the state. And one of the things we've kind of come to is the realization that some regional groups have started to work together and create some really cool synergies and broadband plans. The northwest part of the state, 8 counties up there got together and then through a grant from DOLA said, hey, let's go figure out what the heck we need for broadband. And they hired a consultant, and they're actually putting together a plan for that region. The counties, it's Moffett, Rio Blanco, Grand, Eagle, Pitkin, part of, I think the city of Glen, or the town of Glenwood Springs, I think Jackson County as well, but basically that area. And the really cool thing is they're working together and looking at this thing holistically. And so you might say, well, how does that affect us in Public Safety 911? The folks up there are thinking about those things. And so as we get out, and we're encouraging these folks out there that, a lot of them are town managers, town IT folks, county commissioners, local librarians, school district folks. We're encouraging them to integrate public safety because, we know that there's going to be a huge infrastructure need. In talking with Kimberly about some of the events, about them, losing their fiber, I think that's a perfect example where you've got a town that was cut off, because of an incident. So as we're out there trying to get folks to expand broadband for commercial reasons, I think it's really critical that we integrate public safety. So while these groups aren't necessarily public safety driven, I would really encourage you, if you know about them, to work with them. Most of the people that are participating in these efforts are very open, they're very eager to work with you guys, and they really do understand the importance of public safety. These are your community leaders, and so they want their community to be safe, just like you guys want your communities to be safe in the rural parts of the state. So that actually, they're getting their draft report on Thursday, so it'll be really interesting to see what they're doing there. The southwest part of the state has already done that. They've actually started a process of putting in some fiber, local loop fiber, to use by government and public safety, down Durango, Cortez, that area. They're doing some great things. And I was just up in Montrose Delta, Gunnison area last week trying to start the same process. So that's one of the things we're really working on, is trying to figure out how can we help these regions develop broadband plans to get broadband out in their areas where it might be lacking right now. The other thing that we're working on is kind of a statewide approach. Obviously, we need to figure out, region by region, what is the issue? Is it a last mile? Is it infrastructure? Is it middle mile? But then there's some issues at a statewide level that we have to deal with. And I think everyone in this room has known that for the last couple of years, there's been some attempts to deal with some of those issues. They haven't gone very well. So that's really what I'm focusing on right now, is trying to get those attempts so that we can actually get something done with broadband and telecom reform. I've really spent a lot of my last 6 months really educating folks at the state about the importance of this. We all know this is a complicated issue. They all know it's a complicated issue, but there were some folks that just didn't quite understand how complicated it was. So I've had some really good success at talking with folks at the state and really understanding what we need to do. And I think there's now, I'm optimistic that there's a renewed awareness that we've got to address the issues, not only just telecom reform, there's talk about high cost fund reform, how do we integrate public safety, into some kind of telecom reform. These issues are finally starting, I think, to be understood, and we're getting some holistic approaches to them. And so I've been working with a few folks, some stakeholders on some ideas. I'm hoping in the next week or so, we'll have some more information coming out from the state that really starts to address this issue. And we start an engagement process, because I think we all know January will be here before we know it. And my goal is to get, if we're going to work on something, let's work on it before we get to January. I think in talking with most folks, both private and public, the one message I got was that it's a lot easier for us to talk before January hits than it is once January hits. So that's my goal, is to try to really get those efforts rolling and see what we can do in a holistic standpoint. So as I said, hopefully in the next week I will have some more information that will be coming out from OIT in the state. And once that does, I'll really look for you guys to engage the process. And I think it's important that everyone, both rural, metro, urban, PSAPs, communication, law, fire, everything, engage us with this conversation, because I think the solution's there, it's just we need to find it together. So that's That's really what I've been working on the broadband front. So FirstNet. So I think hopefully everyone knows that we got our FirstNet planning grant was released to us about 3 or 4 weeks, actually about a month and a half ago now. We were one of the first 5 states. So we've been awarded our planning money, which I'll get into here in a minute. FirstNet has actually come out and they did kind of a roadshow about 2 or 3 months ago. They asked 5 state officials and 5 local officials to come. So myself and some other folks from OIT came. We had some folks from CDPS, and then we had some folks from the Springs. We had Elbert County, so I had some local public safety folks come there too. And basically, it was just kind of a first introduction from the FirstNet board to the regions. It was a regional meeting, so there was basically our regional meeting was, you can imagine the Rocky Mountain area, basically us, north, south. Kansas was there, Nebraska was there, so this area, and there wasn't a whole lot of new information. It was just kind of a first, hey, we're FirstNet, here's what we want to do. We've been promised that some ongoing state consultation will happen. I've been waiting for that for about 2 months now. So hopefully that will get going. There's a conference call today where they made another promise that the consultation is going to start. So we're kind of just really waiting for that, and at the same point, trying to get our internal governance going, which I'll get to in a minute here. I think most people know as well that ADCOM was awarded one of the pilot projects for the FirstNet and the LTE system. It was suspended. We are kind of working with ADCOM. They're pretty much leading, but we as OIT are offering support as they negotiate with FirstNet and the federal government on trying to get that moving. It's still kind of in neutral right now. It's been a frustrating process. So we'll see what happens. So our planning grant, and I realize I changed slides around, so you'll see the SLIGP. So SLIGP stands for State and Local Implementation Grant Program. It's basically the money that was set aside in addition to the $7 billion to help states plan for this. So in a rare show of foresight, the federal government said, hey, maybe we should actually fund the planning for this as well. So they basically put a big formula together and allocated each state some money to help plan for this thing. We got $2.5 million, which I was pretty pleased with. And as I said, we were one of the first 5 states to get it. And basically this money was broken into 2 phases. It's supposed to help us to plan and implement this whole thing. It's a 3-year grant window. There's a 20% match, which OIT and CDPS are contributing the match to be able to create the project. And there's a 50-50 split. So 50% of it is what they call phase 1, which I'll get into. 50% is in phase 2. So we got the money. We're finalizing the agreements with CDPS and all the state paperwork that has to go back and forth right now. And the good news is, we'll actually be able to start to hire some people to help us plan for this. And so you say, what are we going to plan for? So basically, the whole premise of FirstNet is that at some point, this FirstNet board is going to plop down a plan on our governor's desk and say, okay, here's our plan to build out the data network for Colorado. Are you in or are you out? At that point, the governor has 90 days to make a decision whether I'm in or I'm out. If we say we're in, then we just basically work with FirstNet and they build out our statewide data network. If the governor says, you know what, I think we can do better on our own, we then have 6 months to get an RFP out for the entire state. So as you can imagine, that's a pretty compressed time frame. So we have to do a lot of work before that happens. So that's really what this planning grant is to help us get everyone in the state up to speed on this whole issue and really level set things. So for the first phase is planning and governance. The second phase is data collection. So with the planning and governance, really what we have to focus on is, the first thing we have to do is establish a governing body. It's in the statute that we have to develop a governing body for the state. Now there's some existing governing bodies in the state, but we have to figure out who's going to govern this thing. And we're trying to learn from some of the past mistakes through statewide collaborative communication efforts and not replicate those. So we're working right now. I've had meetings with CCI, with the Sheriff's Association, the Fire Chiefs Association on, so far what is the best governance structure. So I'm continuing to reach out to these stakeholders to say, what is the best governing structure? What should we have? How should this thing be governed, knowing that this really touches everyone across the state, all levels of government, and all first responders. So based on the feedback that we get from these stakeholders, in the very near future, we're going to have to figure out what this governing body looks like. as soon as we get down that path, I do want to hold a statewide summit soon, which I'll get to. Actually, that's the next slide. So in addition to this governing body, the next thing we have to do is an MOU. FirstNet wants one MOU to cover the whole state. You can imagine that's going to be a bit of a challenge in this state. So we've set aside some money to let the attorney generals and the county attorneys and the city attorneys, basically, my goal is to lock them in a room and say, until you guys figure this out. So we'll see how that goes. So we'll have that, and then the other thing is education and outreach. There's a huge disparity between what people understand about this FirstNet project across the state, and so we're going to be hiring some folks to get out there on the road and really hit the ground and educate people about this. So our additional tasks. So I've been, from multiple sources, I've been given that my primary task is to establish this governing body. We're hoping in the next couple of months we'll figure something out again. But we are not going to just assign this governing body. This is going to be the first responder community telling us who do you guys want to govern this thing. That all levels of government will be, as I said, will need to be participating in this. But it really needs to be first responders and public safety to drive this. So once we can figure that out, we'll get that governing body stood up. And then from that point on, that governing body really directs, the activities. We as OIT will continue to do the work if that's what the governing body wants. But this governing body is really going to make the decisions about how this thing moves forward. So the next thing we're going to do is hire staff. So basically we're hiring a broadband coordinator, think a SWIC, but for broadband. And we're also hiring an outreach manager. Those requisitions are ready to go. Just waiting for the contract between OIT and CDPS to get signed, which is hopefully happening today. So as soon as I get those out, we're going to hire some folks, but really the broadband coordinator is going to be the one really running point for this thing for the whole state, updating our skip, doing all that kind of good stuff, and the outreach manager is going to get in their car and drive around the state and hit as many meetings as possible. As I said, we've already started beginning key stakeholder meetings, so continuing those to talk with folks about how we govern this, get everyone up to speed, and then once we can get everyone's schedules arranged. I was hoping to do it maybe early October, but with everything hopefully happening, I think I'm going to push it out to maybe the end of October, early November, for basically a statewide summit. So we're going to invite everyone. The good news is, as part of the SLICP funding, we have money to actually reimburse local entities for travel time, for time, and so forth. So we want to make it as easy as possible for everyone to come, because I want to get everyone in the same room to talk about this, so we can kind of level set the whole state. And then the MOU, as I talked about, that's if you're a lawyer, good luck. So real quick before we do questions, I just want to talk, there's a lot of conversation about what this whole LTE thing is, as it applies to LMR. This was a slide that was produced by Homeland Security that I think really illustrates it well what the goal is. And I mentioned what the goal is, and that goal is down the road. But really what this talks about is, right now we've got, commercial networks doing your data and cell phone voice, and our traditional land mobile radio doing mission critical voice. We're going to introduce this FirstNet network, which is going to provide data. There's going to be some interaction with private carriers as well for a while. But eventually, what we want is one network that provides this. We cannot afford to continue to maintain two networks. It's just, I see Bill here, he can talk to you about the cost of maintaining an LTE network. We're talking a lot of money maintaining our LMR network. We can't maintain two networks. So at some point, these will converge. Now, when I say some point, I'm talking 10, 15 years down the road. We're not talking tomorrow, we're not talking next week. But I think we do have to start thinking about that as a state, because when we start making decisions about how many millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to invest over the next 10 years, we've got to think about this as well. So I think this is really what shows what we're trying to do long term, knowing that when this thing first gets going, it is just going to be data. And that kind of gets to my last slide. Really what, I just created this slide a couple weeks ago just for something else, but I thought really to kind of show what it does. And so right now you see, for most agencies, for voice, when I say voice, that's just your traditional cell phone voice. Most first responders carry a cell phone as well. Right now, private carriers offer the data and the voice, and we have LMR to do mission critical. What we'll see once FirstNet gets stood up is that FirstNet will provide the data and the voice, and then we'll still have LMR. And then eventually, you will see this FirstNet network start to offer some mission critical voice services. And I say some. There's always going to be places, and this is one of the things at our regional meeting, our friends in Wyoming really drove this home to the FirstNet board, was that geography tops desire. And there are places that you cannot get to with this technology, period. Mountains and wide open plains, So we are always gonna have a need for LMR technology, I think in the foreseeable future. But how we manage that, that's really, again, what we gotta start thinking about, is how we manage that. So, that's what's going on at the state. Did I miss anything like that you can think of? So that's what's going on. So, questions? Mr. Wells?
Have you got a sustainability plan? Do you have a sustainability plan developed for this? As we're well aware with other networks and items throughout the state, there's never been sustainability plans like with our LMR that has really put us in a bad situation at a state level. So what's the plans on this side of the house?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's not that fun. Is there
It's been interesting. I've been in meetings with Kristen, the CIO, twice, where she specifically asked that question in FirstNet, and they basically dodged her questions. So to answer your question, that's what this whole process is going to be. So as soon as we get that governing body up and running, that's what I will recommend to the governing body. Is that's one of the first steps, is we need to figure out as a state with how this looks. That said, we can't do it without FirstNet's input. If FirstNet doesn't tell us what their ideas are, we can't, so we're kind of at a bind. But it's my perspective that, we need to approach this thing as a state to maximize our options. So, from the perspective of, we kind of hope whatever FirstNet gives us is really good, and we just say, hey, yeah, that works great. But on the flip side, we need to prepare for the fact that that plan they give us may not look so good, and we may have to do something on our own. So you're absolutely right. That's, to me, what the first thing we have to do is look at this from a statewide perspective, understand who's going to use this, who's not going to use this. Right off the bat, I've had some rural sheriffs say, I don't care if you give me the greatest data network in the world, my PSAP can't handle data, I don't have laptops in my cars, I can barely afford my radios, I'm not going to be able to use this. Those are the questions we have to answer as a state, and that's what this governing body is going to do. And then this $2.5 million we got, and these people we're going to hire, that's what they're going to, that's their job, is to plan for this thing.
What's the makeup of the governing body? Is it going to be the same as or somewhat similar to the CCSA?
That's what we're having conversations with these, as I said, the Sheriff's Association and the police chiefs is, do we want to use an existing one? Basically the way we look at it is there's a handful of existing governing bodies, that involve public safety. I don't think any of them are perfect, but there's a few that might work. Because the alternative is that we create one. The problem is if we say, hey, let's create a whole new governing body, there's a lot of folks that don't want any more new governing bodies. And the second thing is it would probably take legislative action. And we need to get this thing moving quickly, as in within the next month and a half or so. So those are the exact conversations I've had with, with Chris Olson and the sheriffs, county sheriffs. I met with Jerry from the fire chiefs. And those are the conversations we're starting to have is, okay, of these existing governing bodies, is there one that looks like you guys would accept it? There is some, basically the ones we're talking about, there's obviously the CCSA, but they're statutorily for the radio. There's the SIEC, but that's again more geared towards traditional LMR. There's a new one called the Homeland Security Advisory Council that was stood up last year. That seems to have some promise. It's got really wide representation, public safety, cities, counties. So that one's holding some promise. Our only concern is that there's not a lot of technical people on that one that really understand this technically. So those are the conversations I'm having with these. Is there something we can set up, maybe with a little bit of tweaking, where we can get, the representation we need and get this thing up quickly.
Brian, you don't have 911 community as a stakeholder. 911 community does not show up as a stakeholder, and no offense to our police chiefs and fire chiefs, but they don't understand the technicalities of 911, and you don't have a subject.
Yeah, well, remember, this network is not going to be taking 911. This network, this is LMR. This is LMR for 911. Down the road, there is. Now, there's some thought that once this thing goes mainstream and we start interacting with AT&T and Verizon and the wireless carriers, and there's some partnerships there, and we're sharing spectrum, there is some thought that at that point we can use this network to deliver 911. But right now, this is just to provide service to the first responder out in the field. This will not do 911 right off the bat. That said, I do fully intend to recommend that we include the 911 community in this process from the beginning, because once that day gets there, We want those hooks to be there so we understand that. But basically, again, you know, we're driven by what the NTIA and what FirstNet tells us. Yes.
And another thing, Brian, is that not only just the 911 community, but the PSAP community, because like Debbie had mentioned, even though that you have the sheriffs and the police, you need somebody from the PSAP that understands the technology and the operations that goes on for utilizing the data in the LMR if it gets to that point. So that's one thing that I know, as you're well aware of, I've shared my dissatisfaction with the CCSA and its actual representation with that group. And those are elements, as well as others, that are missing and very obvious in that group that I think if state OITs want to be successful, they need to stay away from that type of model.
And that's one of the, you know, the conversation I had last week, you know, that nuance I think is really how we're trying to structure this, because on the one side, we need, whenever this plan comes down and sits on the governor's desk, this governing body really is going to be the one that represents and says, okay, we recommend we opt in or opt out. So we want, you know, we want the gravitas, so to speak, of folks that can back that up and say, this is what state public safety needs. On the flip side, we know that the technology people are going to be the ones that really understand this and say, yes, this is good or bad. So that's what we're wrestling with, is how do we structure something where we have kind of the executive level folks who can give the appropriate recommendations, but also include that technical level, because you're absolutely right. We need people to understand this technology. I mean, not only is this technology complicated from the, you know, so we've got folks that don't even understand LMR, you know, from a policy level. Now all of a sudden we're going to say, hey, here's this new technology, and they have to both work together, and here, you know, this is going to get complicated. So no, that's what we're trying to figure out, is how do we do that? How do we get a policy level group that also has the technical expertise that can make things happen? You know, I am reaching out to those groups as well. I forgot to mention, I was supposed to meet with the North Central group, communications group 2 weeks ago, obviously the day that everything happened with the floods, so that meeting got postponed. But I am starting to reach out. I'm meeting with the Northwest All Hazard Regions on Thursday. So I am starting to meet with that level of individuals like you're talking about, Mike, that the technical people that understand how this is going to interact. So I'm engaging right now all stakeholders for various reasons.
I understand this is a top-down kind of coming from the feds, but there would seem to be advantages and economies to leveraging commercial providers' existing infrastructure resources. Within the state plan, is there ability to do that sort of thing?
So the way FirstNet was set up, you're absolutely right, Joe. It's pretty much everyone knows and assumes that we will have to have commercial partners to accomplish this. I think, Bill, how much has AT&T invested countrywide so far in LTE? Yeah, so AT&T's invested $30 billion in LTE, and they're not even close to nationwide coverage. And we're talking, and there's $7 billion to do nationwide coverage for us. So you can do the math. So I think everyone realizes there has to be existing, not only just commercial assets, but public assets. You know, part of the state plan is at some point I'm going to come to you and I'm going to say, what towers do you own? What fiber do you own? What government buildings do you own? What can we use for sites? What can we use for backhaul? That's going to be part of this process. The issue is, this is top down. It's our expectation, and what we've been told, is that the relationships with the private carriers will be negotiated at the FirstNet level. That they do not want me, as the state point of contact for Colorado, trying to play off between Verizon and AT&T and T-Mobile and see who gives me the best deal. They want those deals struck at a national level. So the commercial interests will be dealt with at a national level. That said, I've been hearing things that they might kind of approach things regionally. So hopefully they'll include us with that. You know, because I think different carriers have different strengths in different regions. But that commercial carrier negotiation is most likely going to be mostly out of our hands, and that's going to be FirstNet.
So that would limit your ability to come up with an improved state plan better than what the feds come up with?
Not necessarily. I think when you look at, in our state, if you look at most maps, I don't care if it's T-Mobile or Verizon or AT&T, they're going to focus on the population. You know, their holes are going to be pretty similar. So I think we can assume that no matter if it's one carrier or three carriers, I think we can assume the city and county of Denver and the metropolitan area is in pretty good shape, Fort Collins is in pretty good shape, and the Springs is in pretty good shape. I think we can assume that, you know, the southwest part of the state in Ouray and San Miguel County probably doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of coverage. We gotta focus on there. So while you're right, we're not gonna be able to know that right off the bat. I think we can get 90% of the way there just by, assuming that we know that the carriers are in similar markets.
But in developing a state plan, you might want to negotiate a cost-sharing agreement with a commercial carrier in order to extend it to one of the areas where they don't have enough customer base to support LTE. And if we're not allowed to negotiate at the state level, we won't be able to do that.
Yeah, no, yeah, I do not anticipate us being able to negotiate with the carriers at all. Like I said, that negotiation is gonna be at the FirstNet level, because it's not gonna just be Colorado. If they've said they don't want one partner, one size fits all, which I think is wise. But, they're probably gonna negotiate with two, I would imagine they'll probably pick two cellular partners to negotiate with, to offer some redundancy and some backhaul and some diversity. But again, yeah, we are gonna have no ability to negotiate those contracts.
Any other questions or comments for Brian?
Please feel free to contact me. And as I said, you'll be seeing more and more on the FirstNet as we can hire some folks and get them out in your communities. So welcome them, and please don't yell at them. So.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, just 1 second, sorry.
During Joe Benkert's presentation on the 911 Colorado Foundation, the dean tried to send me some additional footage from their PSAs, and it just now came through. So if you guys don't mind, we're going to take a little detour from the agenda and view those real quick. Do you have anything you want to say before we? Do you have any
I'd like to
comments?
say one thing. One of the advantages, I'd like to say that one of the advantages of participating in these financially is that you do get a voice on the messaging committee. So the types of issues that have been brought up here today, we'd really like to encourage people to bring them up in the messaging committee and to be financially, and to participate financially. But that's it. These are the 4 English commercials. We still have the Spanish commercial, and probably 8 to 10 radio spots as well.
Thank you, Dean.
If you have telephone service, this is an important message.
One of the resources we use to notify you of a threat to life or property, such as wildfire, flood, or police action, is the emergency notification service.
You need to register your mobile, internet, or landline phone so we know what number to call.
Go to 911colorado.org to find the link to your local emergency notification service.
Don't miss the warning. Go to 911colorado.org and sign up now.
apologize for the delay between these. I'm trying to set them up so that they can see them on the webcast as well.
If you have telephone service, this is an important message. One of the resources we use to notify you of a threat to life or property, such as a wildfire or police action, is the Emergency Notification Service.
You need to register your mobile, internet, or landline phone so we know what number to call.
Go to 911colorado.org to find a link to your local emergency notification service.
Don't miss the warning. Go to 911colorado.org and sign up now.
If you have telephone service, this is an important message.
One of the resources we use to notify you of a threat to life or property, such as wildfire, flood, or police action, is the Emergency Notification Service.
You need to register your mobile, internet, or landline phone so we know what number to call.
Go to 911colorado.org to find the link to your local emergency notification service.
Don't miss the warning. Go to 911colorado.org and sign up now.
If you have telephone service, this is an important message.
One of the resources we use to notify you of a threat to life or property, such as a wildfire or police action, is the Emergency Notification Service.
You need to register your mobile, internet, or landline phone so we know what number to call.
Go to 911colorado.org to find the link to your local emergency notification service.
Don't miss the warning. Go to 911colorado.org and sign up now.
Just in case anyone missed it, what was that address they should go to?
Relay Colorado?
So next up is Lynn Notarioni, and I've asked Lynn to speak on the NextGen 911 dockets today that are currently before the Public Utilities Commission. But since I have you here, I was hoping, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot too much, but I was hoping you could give us an update on any outages or any other disruption of service due to the flooding last week, if you have any information on that.
Okay, if you'll allow me, I actually got an update on the outages that's sitting on my phone. And let me do this one first, and then I'll grab that and go through and make sure I give you all the most current. There's probably people actually in this room who know very directly for their areas a lot more of the specific data on some outages that they're hearing about that are still, underway. And I don't think we have CenturyLink here today, do we? In order to be able to read out. But
He stepped out.
oh, well, and he might be able to, but if not, I did literally just get a letter from CenturyLink kind of outlining all the outages, so that might be the best public source of data. So, okay, thank you. I think most of the folks in the room here have probably seen me before and heard about and have been involved in participating and trying to define what's happening or should be happening for NextGen 911 across the state. For those that don't, I'm Lynn Notarioni with the PUC. I have the telecom staff section at the PUC. So there's the number and email in case anybody has any questions after we're done or that I don't cover. Okay, I'm just going to go real briefly through this, and I won't bore you with the details of our legal processes necessarily at the state and the procedures. As most people are aware, for probably a couple of years now, 2-3 years, through the task force and other efforts, this community has been going about trying to figure out how do we really define what we need for next generation 911 and move forward. And there's been a lot of good efforts through the Mission Critical Report, through the creation of the Next Gen Steering Committee, which Daryl mentioned before is on hold, but the subcommittees, but still exist, and they still meet after the task force meeting. But and Next Gen 911 is making, more progress in some states and not in other states, and has a long way to go in terms of really being well-defined nationally. Oh, sorry, is this better? Okay, sorry. And so, I think vendors have come to us and presented, some vendors what they thought was available. We have a current, what we call basic emergency service provider in CenturyLink, who provides our current 911 network, from which we'll need to maintain and transition over to Next Gen 911. But I think everybody's been starting to get real frustrated that good progress hadn't been made in really getting to some implementation of Next Gen 911 and taking that next leap to get something going and implemented. So a couple of things happened, which I'll talk about here, and then open it up to questions or stop me along the way. The first one was CenturyLink, back in May, on May 17th, filed what we call an advice letter or a tariff filing as the existing emergency services provider to update their tariff and go ahead and offer out their Next Gen 911 routing and transport. Now, they've been participating in the task force meetings, and most of you probably know they did that because they were hearing a lot of groundswell around, we just need to keep moving forward, as a way to start pushing forward. They recognized in that the pricing that they offered, that there would be an investigation around it, there would still be a lot of work that needed to be done, and that certain policies across the state regarding Next Gen 911 had not been set. But it was a way to trigger the process to start moving forward. So we opened a proceeding at the commission. The proceeding number is up at the top there, and I put it up there intentionally so everybody has that, these numbers for going forward. You can access everything off at the commission's website electronically, and these numbers are critical to getting to that information. So that's the reason I put it up there. But in July, because of another filing that was made by a number of the 911 authorities, CenturyLink filed a motion with the commission to stay their proceeding, basically put it on hold, and to waive the commission's end timeline for having to make a decision on this CenturyLink tariff, recognizing that everybody needed to come together and really talk about what were the policy issues, what were the decisions there, how do we move forward. So, and rather than leaving the docket open or the proceeding open, which for the commission just causes some legal mess, the commission decided to what we call permanently suspend the tariff or shut down the docket and move over to the next proceeding and do the work in the next proceeding, which I'll talk about. And then at some point, when the appropriate work had been done there, whether it's Quest tariff or another application or other providers coming in, filing to get those same certifications and become a provider of Next Gen 911 services, it would be appropriate at that time. So that's basically why that proceeding was shut down. After that, we did get a number of letters from several 911 authorities, starting with Park County and Grand Junction, in that docket, kind of indicating what they thought was important and what they thought needed to happen. Unfortunately, the docket was closed. They have since filed their letters in the other proceeding that I'm going to be talking about. So we haven't lost track of everything that those 911 authorities were interested in and saying. So that's all I'll say about the CenturyLink tariff at this point. So the other request that we got was on July 5th. Several 911 authorities filed an application with the commission asking us to commence a proceeding regarding how best to provide Next Gen 911. The commission opened a proceeding, that's the proceeding number at the top, so this is going to be the really important one for everybody to pay attention to, and when you come into our system, to use that proceeding number, and it will pull up anything that's been filed in that proceeding by anyone. What the commission has done, any decisions they've issued, any, I'll call them parties, they're not really officially parties, but anybody who's been involved in the docket to the extent they filed anything, it will be available under this particular number. Because our commissioners had
for years, and commissioners change over time, not spent a lot of time in the 911 arena. They felt it was important to hold a commissioner information meeting just to get a baseline and really understand what was going on, or what Next Gen 911 even meant, what some of the issues and areas were to be considered. So the staff did a presentation in that proceeding on July 30th, and it was very well attended by the 911 community as well. And I say 911 community, that's both the 911 authorities as well as vendors, as well as telecom carriers. And so the commission really did appreciate the opportunity. As a matter of fact, I got feedback from them that they felt like it was one of the most informative information meetings they had really ever had on any of their topics at the commission. They have a great deal of passion around wanting to make sure they take the right steps and very diligently move forward aggressively in deploying Next Gen, helping to deploy Next Gen 911 where it's appropriate for them and within their space and their jurisdiction. So that's the good news. The commission issued a decision basically recapping what they had heard in the commission information meeting and asking for comments from the interested stakeholders. So again, 911 authorities, telecom providers, 911 vendors, because they really want this process to be as informed, as transparent as possible. And if there's any value, I know that the state of Colorado, as our telecom providers, are very quick to remind us, and the vendors are quick to remind us that we are unique in Colorado in that we don't have a single statewide 911 authority. We have a task force, we have a commission that has authority over certain parts of it, and so we have some unique challenges as to how to go about figuring out how to deploy Next Gen 911. The nice part about having the commission is we do have an inherent infrastructure around document repositories and mechanisms through hearings and other ways of doing things that can give us structure to bringing this all together that we can't otherwise get done more informally through the task force, or we haven't been as successful getting done through the task force. So the commission asked for comments as well as reply comments on what needed to take place to move Next Gen 911 forward in the state from the standpoint of putting that infrastructure in place to handle Next Gen 911, not from the standpoint of telling the authorities what they need to put in their centers or telling the providers how they have to place 911 calls, but how do we get that infrastructure in place that moves the Next Gen 911 communication coming in the door over to the PSAP so that the PSAP can handle it. There were comments filed on 9/6 by Bretza, Intrado, CenturyLink, and AT&T, and then reply comments from CenturyLink, Bretza, Intrado, Level 3, and Metza that just came in. So I apologize, I haven't read all of the comments that came in on 9/20. But specifically, they were looking at the areas of what do we need to think about, know, discuss around technologies and standards, network operations, governance and policy, maybe a little less education and awareness, because that really at the end of the day is up to the local communities. But there was in the filing that was made by the 911 authorities that opened this docket a suggestion that an RFI go out to the vendor community as a way to really know what's out there and available and what the costs of it are, to bring that data to the table. So the commission was interested in what the different stakeholders thought about that RFI process. And as well, I think we've all talked about it would be most meaningful to have a series contained, hopefully, to really give it some direction, of some technical workshops to really get at what does the state want and need for Next Gen 911, and how do we move forward quickly? And does that need to result in ongoing changes in legislation? Does it need to result in changes to the rules at the commission? Does it need any of that? Can we just move forward with vendors filing tariffs or filing additional BESP applications? That needs to be fleshed out and fleshed out as quick as possible. So they were interested in suggestions from the stakeholders around what are the technical workshops and how would we go about having them? And is there anything else we've forgotten about topics or issues that are just burning with everybody? So that's the point at which we're at right now. From here, because these comments were filed, the reply comments on 9/20, the commission will take all that into consideration, and hopefully very shortly, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess mid-October, probably mid to late October, they'll issue another decision that says, here's how we are going to proceed forward with this proceeding in terms of workshops, what they look like, the time frames, who and how to participate, etc. One thing I will mention is this is a miscellaneous docket, so that it isn't a litigated or adjudicatory proceeding like we might normally be used to at the commission. This is a little more open forum, and because of that, it does give parties, one, the opportunity to not have to use lawyers necessarily to do everything for them, and two, to be able to input at any time. So we've set these comment dates. We are always interested in what the different parties have to say. And if you wait too long to file something, well, we might have moved ahead before you filed it, but there's nothing that precludes you from filing things at any time in this docket if you have issues or become aware of things or have concerns. I recognize, just like we at the commission always get grumpy at the FCC, that they always want us to conform to their processes out in Washington, D.C. and file comments on their timeframes, and it's a lot of overhead and extra activity on top of your regular and probably more important jobs that you're doing day to day. So we are cognizant of that, and we're going to try and be aware of that and find ways to incorporate and involve everybody and their input as best we can and not make it too administratively burdensome. But that being said, we really do need things on the record, and so we're encouraging people as best they can to come in, come participate, call us as staff and ask us questions, ask to have a meeting with us. At this point in time, given the kind of docket it is, there's nothing that precludes us staff from talking to you. We don't have those kinds of restrictions yet in this proceeding. So we really do want to hear from the 911 authorities. We really do want to learn what's available from the vendors, and we really do care about what are the biggest policy issues. At the end of the day, I don't think our commission has a preconceived notion over having to have authority over one thing or the next thing, but they do want to make sure that they can help and enable Next Gen 911 to move forward. I know Brian mentioned that they're still working on how do we move forward with broadband and how do we reform telecom. And we saw it last year with the legislation, not intentionally, but the telecom reform legislation last year ends up indirectly having impacts on 911. So we're trying to get ahead of the ball game here so it's best positioned to really meet the needs of what the 911 community needs going forward to put in place Next Gen 911 and not just have to react to other external events that might end up impacting 911. And then we're all scrambling. So that's the update so far, and with that, I'll take any questions if anybody has any. Oh.
So those were the only authorities you heard from, was two?
On the comment cycle.
The question
Now,
is,
I should say that there were a number of letters. The letters I mentioned that came in, they were some single page letters, but I think, so they didn't explicitly go into, here's how I think the workshops ought to carry out or anything like that. Theirs went more to, make some general policy issues, make sure it's statewide, We think other carriers should apply through the BESP process. That tells us a lot indirectly, even though it didn't go into detail in the comments.
And are you looking for that kind of detail?
Absolutely.
So you're absolutely looking for the authorities to come in and give you some detail on the technical issues?
Sure. And I would hope, we're gonna have to figure out from here, because we're gonna continue to, we gotta make the decisions based on what we've got in terms of how to proceed forward and structure some of this. But it could be that, you know, as we set up these workshops, that maybe the first workshop is just with the authorities to have a discussion around their needs and their thoughts and really hash some of that out, and then move into a broader session. I don't know that yet. I haven't had the conversations with our commissioners yet because these comments just came in. But we'll be looking at ways. We're not going to proceed without, if you guys don't come to us, I'm going to go find you. Okay? and reach out to you. And I know there's some people who very specifically, you know, Brett says always, they've got Joe, he's always weighing in, he'll put together a whole document. Some of you don't, but you have definite opinions. We're interested in all of them. So I don't want to cut this thing short just because nobody's come in here. We'll come find those comments and get them.
Anything else for Lynn? I might just mention real quick, if you ever need to find those numbers for either of those proceedings, if you go to the Resource Center website, click on Resources, then Legislation and Regulation, down at the bottom of the page are both of those proceeding numbers and the link to the PUC's filing search page.
And there's also, I think, on the next page here is our e-filings page for search page that you can just go, when that pops up, you'll just see a box that says proceeding number. If you put that 13AL in there, it will pull up all the documents that and what parties have filed. So
13AL or the 13M?
I'm sorry, 13M. Yeah. So with that, do you want me to go grab my status?
Yeah, if you're comfortable doing that. I know I put you on the spot.
That's okay. If it looks like I shouldn't say it, I'll do that. It says confidential here, Daryl, I'll retract.
Yeah. Don't want to get you in trouble.
Sorry, gotta scale it to my eyes and then keep scrolling across. Okay. And again, let me. I got a link at the bottom. Confidential. Okay. I am not seeing it as confidential. So, it looked like, well, and I think we are all aware of the fiber issue up in Estes Park. And I know Kimberly's here and could probably go into more extensive detail about that. So it looks like there was a fiber cable being replaced on Fish Creek Road, Drake, Storm Mountain, Cedar Cove, and the Big Thompson. They're still assessing the damage. They're up in a helicopter looking at that. And again, these are just CenturyLink things, so we don't get a lot of the, well, really any of the wireless carriers' data or Comcast data. And I think, honestly, that's an issue for consideration going forward as we look to when this all gets replaced, as we move forward and look at how's the right and best way to do things, how do we manage and do we have the opportunity to understand comprehensively the communications outages in total and not just from CenturyLink, or is there a way, if it's 911 affecting, to have those other carriers who are experiencing outages report those in, which our rules do require, into CenturyLink as the BESP so people can really be aware of what's going on. So I'll just give that commercial now. Between outage reporting, diversity of routes, communications as this is happening, there are a tremendous amount of issues that I think we all need to address collectively as a community. And some of those already have rules around them, maybe not as detailed as they should be, but I think we're learning that we have a lot of work to do in how that all gets managed between the 911 community and the providers. So now that I gave that commercial, my phone went off. Okay. Turn. It looks like cable was already replaced in Berthoud, as well as West Loveland. Aerial cable problems in Lyons. Okay, it looks like they placed in there, CenturyLink placed some fiber on poles in the ground laid to ensure continued service. There's areas of McConnell and Park that are still out. CenturyLink is still on some backup generators in Lyons, and as we all know, Lyons was pretty severe, so even getting access in some of those is a problem. The Pinewood area and Apple Valley, according to CenturyLink, are still not accessible, at least as of the time they did it. They're looking at damage in Boulder in the 4 Mile Canyon, Lee Hill, Left Hand Canyon, Gold Hill, Sunshine Canyon, and other areas around Boulder. They've got a project underway on Brook Road in Boulder to replace some cable. There's some conduit on Highway 72. That's a problem. Nederland experienced aerial cable damage, and some power issues are going on in that area. Jamestown appears to be out of service. And they're working on the engineering right now to see what kind of fiber solution they can put into place. This is still this is in Jamestown. So there's several areas of Jamestown. In Weldona, their facilities and cable repairs are underway. And then with some specific damage on County Road, I love these, 59 and a half in County Road 370. Kersey, they've located some cable damage in there and some cabinet damage, and they still need to replace and splice those. Evans has some out of service, and FEMA's still restricting their entrance into the area. That is it for now, as far as I can tell, Daryl.
Sounds like enough.
Yeah, and wait. No. There's more. Oh, we didn't get Longmont was the one on South Great Street. Cable, they've got, they restored the cable into Allens Park. I mentioned Weldona, Sterling, Kersey, Evans. Oh, Johnston. They have some minor cable damages on 2 bridges, and they're doing the engineering work right now. And in Milliken,
dealing with it on an individual customer basis. That's it for now, unless anybody else has any updates they want and need to share. So a lot of work going on, and I know from CenturyLink's perspective, they have shipped in a lot of crews from everywhere to try and help this, as well as gotten support from, thank you, other carriers, AT&T and Verizon, even power companies who've stepped in to try and help them and give them facilities.
Can you share that report since it's timely about the flood?
You know what, let me, like I said, I didn't see anything confidential on here, but let me just double check with CenturyLink and make sure they're okay with me.
Yeah, it'd be nice if the PSAP knew what was affecting in their own county.
Okay, so
'Cause we
I
have-
mentioned this
Polk County
early.
hasn't been notified.
Absolutely, and honestly, the PUC isn't even on the telecommunications side, part of that process at the Emergency Operations Center that deals with telecommunications. I'm not sure why. That was news to me, so that's why I gave the commercial I did that said, we have a lot of work to do, I think, collectively as a community to improve communications, to shore up outage reporting, and to have diversity identified, not just as people say redundancy of circuits, but diversity of circuits, in order to not have, hopefully we won't have the scale of a problem again, but even for the smaller issues, we know there's more coming when things freeze and snow and thaw, and there'll be more fires and things like that. So it's unfortunate that the floods happened, but the good news is I think it gives us the awareness to go get this done. And I have conveyed that to my commissioners and to others, and I've conveyed that to the governor's office as of this morning. And so hopefully there will be some measures that start to shore those processes up so the communications are in place.
Thank you, Lynn. Is there anyone from one of the affected areas that has anything they want to add, or any further updates? Well, it is 3:30, but I promised a update on text to 911 earlier, and I kind of skipped that part of the agenda, so I'm going to go through it real quick so that you guys aren't being kept late. But I did promise this earlier, and I think there's some information on here that you do need to know. Most of you know that as of June 30th of this year, the big four cell phone providers, that's Sprint, T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T, have all instituted the bounce back messages that they promised the FCC that they would do. The one that I got when I tested my AT&T phone back home was make a voice call to 911 for help, text to 911 is not available. So that's now in place for people using those four carriers. The other carriers are required to have a bounce back message in place by September 30th, so within 1 week of today, all carriers should have bounce back messages in place. Those four large providers that I mentioned have all committed to having text to 911 available nationwide by May 15th of 2014. Again, as I've said at task force meetings in the past, this doesn't mean that the PSAPs will have to have text to 911 by May 15, 2014. It just means that the carriers will be ready by then to provide it. It will then be up to the PSAP to say, yes, we are technologically ready to receive text to 911, and we want to receive text to 911, and then the carriers will be able to comply by that date. There is currently no deadline for other carriers to actually deliver text to 911, but the FCC is considering that. I think it's a fairly sure bet that the FCC will set a deadline for the other carriers as well. NENA has just released two documents that might be of interest. One is a document called "Is Text to 911 Right for My PSAP?" It's just a list of questions for you to consider about text to 911 before you pull the trigger on that, or before you make steps to move forward with it. Another one is the FAQ, which is Internet terminology for frequently asked questions for interim text to 911. So it's just some things that you might want to review before taking additional steps. One of the other things that the Big Four providers also agreed to do was to provide quarterly reports to the FCC. There's a link on here, and when I post this presentation to the website, you'll be able to just click on that link, but I can also send it to you. That to a press release from NENA, which has within it links to all 4 reports from the big providers. And I'm just going to get kind of a brief overview of those. Essentially, there are 3 delivery options for text to 911. One is SMS using a browser application. That is, the caller uses their phone to text to 911, and it's received in the PSAP across its own separate browser screen. So it might be on a computer that you don't have there now, or it could be on a computer that you have now but that has internet access. And I've got pros and cons listed here. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip those, and you can read those later if you want. Some of the pros and cons of each of the methods for delivering 911 to the PSAP. The second one is SMS to TTY. One of the things that I will mention about that, without getting too much into the pros and cons, is that it does tie up a 911 trunk if you use this method, because it essentially turns the text message conversation into a TTY conversation, so it holds the 911 trunk line open for the duration of that call. So if you only have 2 or 4 trunks, it's probably good to keep that in mind if you're considering which methodology to use. SMS over direct IP, which that's what you would want to use if you are receiving your text messages into some computer telephony integration that has a text interface built in, as a lot of the phone systems now do. But just to give a quick update, a quick overview of what was in the quarterly reports, Verizon states that they actually have SMS to 911 using a web browser client available now. That was news to me. So they actually have that available now. They are working on SMS to TTY. They have some early adopters that they launched in May and July in other parts of the country, but it's not available nationwide yet. SMS to over direct IP is scheduled to be available by the end of 2013. So that's where Verizon is right now. One thing that they included in their report to the FCC is they included copies of press releases from the agencies that they are already live with. So if you want to see examples of, when you're ready to activate text to 911 in your PSAP and you want to see some examples of press releases from other agencies announcing that availability, that's one place that you can go to look at those. And again, if you get to that point and can't remember where that was, just send me an email and I'll be happy to send you the link. AT&T, they plan to launch first text to 911 trial in Tennessee at the end of the 3rd quarter or beginning of 4th quarter 2013. And, where'd Bill go? Bill was right there, Bill Swords. I was going to see if he had a further update for us. So I don't know if that's happened or not, because as you know, it is the end of the 3rd quarter, so I don't know if that's happened yet, but I haven't heard anything from my friends in Tennessee about that, so I don't think it has. No specifics in their report as to which delivery methods they will ultimately support, just they were basically investigating that to determine which methods they want to use. Sprint, theirs only says that they are working towards the May 15th, 2014 deadline and that they have tested SMS to TTY in the state of Maine. Nothing about the other 2 methods. And T-Mobile basically just says the same thing, which is that they are working towards meeting that May 15th deadline. So that was a very, very short version of a text to 911 update. And I'll be updating that